All right. Man, how's that pizza? It's delicious, isn't it? Woo! Guys, hey, let me tell you, you'll never feel dumber than if you email a lot of guys and say, hey, show up early so that we can start at 7, and then said guys actually show up early, even Tim Kennedy, and then the pizza's not here yet, but it is en route from Marymount Mio's. So my thought is, let's jump in. We'll do a little bit of the early banter. When the pizza gets here, we will attack it like a plague of locusts, and then we'll return, okay? So just another disappointing moment after a disappointing day if you're a Bengals fan, right? Yeah, we're doing good here. Well, from my summation, if you're a Bengals fan on a day like today, there's like four types of people after a Bengals loss, okay? And I want to know which type you are. So some of us are people, right? Like some of you are like, wait, there was a Bengals game today? Right, I know some of you exist, you know, you could care less, it doesn't matter. Some of us, and this is where I put myself, are just accepting pessimists, right? Where you're like, I knew they were going to lose, and they lost, so it just kind of met expectations. Some of us are Hope Springs eternal optimists, right? We're like, it's fine. The Ravens lost today too. I'm going to be hurt again next week by the Bengals. I'm ready to be hurt again, Joe Burrow. And then some of you, Patrick Grosser maybe, you are like ruin my week club people. You know, we're like, you're the people I'm not even going to bring up the Bengals to because I know you're going to be angry / you might punch me in the face if I say the wrong thing. Okay, so kind of self-select here. Who's in the first group that you're people? Like you're like, I don't even know there was a game today. The Bengals play badminton, right? Right? I got you. Okay. Who's an accepting pessimist? So you're just like, I've just come to accept that this is how it is as a Bengals fan. Okay. All right. Any of my Hope Springs eternal optimists? Doesn't surprise me, Nelson. You're a hopeful guy. Anyone in the ruined my week club that we shouldn't talk to anymore? Yeah. All right. So I will say from experience, and I meant to do that, by the way. I will say from experience, this meeting's a lot easier to lead when the Bengals win, you know, and when the pizza's here on time. Those two things help if you ever get in the business of leading meetings. Just keep those in mind. Here's what I want to do before the pizza gets here, which should be any second. I would love for a guy, okay, because you guys listen to me a lot. Is anyone brave enough to give us just like a 60-second max recap of what the heck we've been talking about for the last 5 weeks? Okay, it doesn't have to go super deep into details, but just what are the 3 words, the 3 drives, the 3 motivations we've been looking at? What's maybe the dangers of those? Any of that, because there's literally guys here tonight where it's their first time here. They haven't been here on the journey, and I love that. But anybody brave enough to do the recap? I knew somebody would do it. All right.
Okay, I'm brave enough because I missed last week, so I have actually heard less than most of you guys. But this series has been about the traps or idols or strangleholds or sins that men can fall prey to. Sometimes we're aware of it, sometimes we're not. And the 3 main categories fall under control, significance, or comfort.
Nice. That's good, Dr. J. Woo! Man, that was perfect. That was amazing. Okay. And what we've talked about is that, like, we all probably curve one way or another with those words. That some of us are really struggle with control in our lives. Some of us maybe struggle with a need for significance. Some of us maybe struggle with just a craving of comfort. And how none of those things are bad at face value, right? Like, those are all good things. But when we take them to extremes, that they can cause a lot of damage in our lives. That's sort of what we've been exploring. Last week, we looked at control, right? And we talked about how when you look behind control, you see fear, right? The things that scare us are the things we try to control. And tonight what we're going to do is we're going to look at both, okay? So we're going to look at significance, and we're going to look at comfort, all right? But first, you're going to go get pizza, okay? So go grab pizza, hustle back as quick as we can. I would love to start at like 7:10 if we can get 50-something guys through the pizza line in 5 minutes. So have at it. There's 15 of them. Make bad decisions. Eat 3 pieces. you deserve it. You've been waiting. / it'll soak up all the alcohol in your belly. So that'll be good too, right, for driving purposes. All right, gents. Why don't we jump in? We got a lot to get to tonight. We are going to run through tonight like the Philadelphia Eagles ran through our defense today, okay? It's going to be quick. We're going to hit it hard. It's going to be fun. All right, tonight we're talking about significance and comfort. We're trying to land the plane. So last week, again, we talked about control. And I'm always I like seeing both sides of things. So there's probably, again, a part of you that's like, hey, what's the big deal about wanting to be significant, right? Like, I think it's kind of a normal desire, especially for us guys. We want to live lives of significance, and I think that's a good thing. But here's where, again, it can become a bad thing, is if it becomes sort of the driving force of your life, okay? And here's the question you would ask yourself is like, what's driving this force in me? And often what I think I find is the drive for significance is this drive to answer this question, right? Am I good enough? Right, and it's got two ugly stepsisters that maybe you think of in a different way. It could be, am I good enough? Do I have what it takes? Do I measure up? That if those are sort of these driving fundamental idols, forces, drives in your life, that you're always trying to answer that question, then you're always going to try to answer it through significance. And maybe that wound came from like your parents, right? Like I think some of us had dads, and we talked about wounds the last session of Authentic Manhood, but maybe your relationship with your dad, whether he's here still or not, gave you this wound of like, am I good enough? Or maybe just being like a middle schooler gave you this wound. I mean, yeah, any of you guys remember playing like pickup basketball or football at recess in like middle school? You know, like I have a core memory. I went to Madeira, so I remember going to Selman Middle School, and it's lunchtime, and we're playing pickup football, okay? And Jeff Hearn, who's like, maybe some of you know Jeff. I don't even know. He works for ESPN now, but Jeff's like tall and athletic. He could like dunk a basketball when he was a freshman, you know. Well, he was the quarterback, and he just wouldn't throw the ball to me. Like anybody been there where you're like, hey, over here, I'm open. You know, and he's like, hey, I'm not throwing to you, right? And we were sort of friends in class. So after recess, I literally remember being like, hey, man, why don't you ever throw me the ball? He's like, because you stink. Like literally, like I'm 48 years old. I don't know how old you are in like 5th or 6th grade, but that is the memory that is stuck in my head to this day. That this drive for significance is really, if it becomes rooted in you, is a drive to answer some of these questions. And maybe we'll look at this real quick. So one of my favorite movies is a movie called Knight's Tale, Heath Ledger, 2001. I think it's one of his best movies. But in that movie, Heath Ledger's character is William Thatcher, and he's a squire. So he's like the supporter, the helper for a knight who jousts, okay? So horses and jousting. Well, the knight dies, unbeknownst to anybody else. So Heath Ledger starts to impersonate him because he can jump, you know, a social ladder. He can go from being a squire to a knight. So he's impersonating him. And early on in the movie, he has this showdown with a, let's see here, a guy named, really doesn't matter, right? But Count Adhamar Anjou, okay? And he's the handsome prince. And he loses, but there's this interaction that happens that is always stuck in my head, all right, between the two of them. So this is after Heath Ledger loses, and here's what the guy tells him. You have been weighed, you have been measured, and you have been found wanting. And as guys, I think that's a core fear that a lot of us have. And what's crazy is that's actually a quote from the Bible, believe it or not. So in Daniel, there's this moment where God is calling out a Babylonian king. And if you've ever heard the phrase, the writing on the wall, that's where it comes from. This like human hand floats and writes that on the wall for the king, like telling him, hey, you've been weighed and you've been found wanting. Well, that is what can be the driving factor if you're really driven to find significance. And it becomes a core value in your life. And on page 100 there, we're going to jump into the book a little bit here tonight. We've been looking at these if-then lies, right? So last week with control, it was like, if I can control the things in my life that feel out of control, then I'll be happy, I'll be content, I'll be secure, right? And we looked at how that's a big lie, that really we don't have control. And even when we think we do, when we actually control things, they don't always make us happy, all right? So go to page 100. Number 1, this is the lie of significance. The deep idol of significance tells us the basic lie that if, again, it's an if-then lie, if a certain person, a certain social group, or other colleagues in my profession, if they find me worthy of attention or love, if they acknowledge my value or greatness, as long as I am not disgraced before them, then I'll be important and I'll be acceptable. So it's this idea of if my boss, my coworker, right, people in my field, or my neighbor, or my brother-in-law, like if they find me valuable, right, and they're kind of impressed with what I do, then I'll really be somebody, right? Like then I'll really feel significant in my life. And I think we can all see this play out, right? Like in other people, it's easier to see for sure, but I think I see it playing out in myself as well. And I think we all want this, right? Like, don't we want people to speak well of us? Like, don't you want to be liked? Like, isn't that kind of normal? I think that's normal. But it can get to be too much. And there's a couple of traps that you can fall into. And the first one is the approval trap. Okay, number 2A on page 100. Also called the fear of a man is often overly concerned with disappointing or upsetting other people. And here's where you become basically a people pleaser, right? That like you're so concerned to like keep people happy with you because they give you your significance that you're like, I'm going to make them happy no matter what. And one of my favorite people pleasers is a guy named Michael Scott. Does anybody know Michael Scott? So I think there's a lot of us that are Michael Scotts, right? Like we would say, like, I don't have to be liked, but I need to be liked if I'm being really honest, and it's really nice to be praised as well, right? And as you think of people pleasers, I think it breaks down into like 2 buckets, if you will. Because I think there's the people pleasers that are like the suck-ups, right? Like any Simpsons fans, longest-running animated show, I think our longest-running television show in all of history, 35 years or something like that. But think of like Mr. Smithers, okay? Mr. Burns' assistant, like he's a big suck-up, right? Like he wants to keep Mr. Burns happy no matter what. So he's going to do dumb things. He's going to like give him like all these false compliments. He's going to massage his head like a weirdo. And then there's Mr. Burns, and he's a people pleaser as well, but he does it through manipulation, right? That he wants people to be happy with him, but he kind of goes around to it, right? He puts on the front of, I don't really care, but I'm going to manipulate things to still have people be happy with me. So it's a little bit of like, if you have ever just thought about kind of like curating situations to keep people happy with you, right? You don't want them to know you want them to be happy, but you're going to make things work that way, if that makes sense. And it's a trap. 2B on page 100. You may be hypersensitive to criticism and often react even to the slightest criticism with extreme responses. How many of you guys like to be criticized? Raise your hand. Anybody love that, right? When you like go into work and your boss is like, hey, I got a few thoughts for you, right? Or maybe your wife is like, hey, I got a few thoughts for you. Criticism sucks, right? Like I don't think any of us look forward to it. And there's that fine line between feedback and criticism. But here, when significance is becoming an idol and is driving you, any amount of criticism will be met with extreme responses. So if you're the suck-up people pleaser like Mr. Smithers, criticism will be met with panic, right? Like, oh no, everybody's going to be happy with me. I got to figure this out. I got to make Ron happy with me again. I got to fix this, Or if you're the master manipulator, kind of like Mr. Burns, criticism will be met with anger, right? Like, how dare they? I'm going to crush them by manipulating the situation around me. So that's one of the traps. If significance is an issue that you're seeing maybe in your life, is the approval trap, which plays out in people-pleasing. The other is the recognition trap. Okay, then maybe in your life, in your career, you're driven to find titles, right? And to get to that next level, that next office, that next whatever it is. And none of that's bad, right? Like on face value, like we all want to be successful. But when that becomes the driving force, it can be super unhealthy. Number 3 on page 100. The recognition trap is based on pride, hungers for admiration and fame, and is often fueled by comparison with other men. Any of you guys ever find yourselves doing that, where you're kind of like comparing baseball cards in a way with like the guys around you in your life? Right, you're jumping on Facebook and you're like comparing the vacations that you went on compared to what you're seeing somebody else. Or you're on LinkedIn and you're comparing like job titles. Like, well, I'm a director and they're a executive director, you know, or I'm a whatever, and that comparison becomes this trap that we can fall into. Anybody ever seen the movie American Psycho with Christian Bale? Okay, well here, I'm about to show you what I think is a classic example of comparison in the white-collar world. So as you watch this scene, it's pretty famous, it's the business card scene. Just look and see what all their titles are, because they're identical. But also, hear the comparison that's happening. Man, it's a classic scene there, right? And it sounds it's ridiculous, because they're all vice presidents, right? Like they have the same exact title, and they're one-upping each other on different synonyms for white, right? Like bone, eggshell, and then the guy with the watermark just takes it to the next level. But isn't there a little part of you that feels that too, right? That you're just kind of, oh man, it's hard not to do that. It's hard not to do that with your lawn. Like any of you guys have like lawn commandos, where you're like checking out your lawn compared to your neighbor's lawn, you know? Ron, we've had this conversation, Ron. I know you got a lawn neighbor, right? He's very intense on his lawn, you know? And it's just like, man, it's just built into us. But could it be a trap? Well, here's what I want you guys to talk about. And this will be kind of a standard, 7-8 minute share time. But for you, which significance trap are you most susceptible to? And how have you seen it play out in your life? So again, even if you're like, hey, significance isn't anything to me, I could care less. Like you call me a bum, I'll go live in a cardboard box down by the river. It doesn't matter to me, Ryan. But I would say we're all probably susceptible to one of them or the other at our worst. Okay, like are you a people pleaser? Or like you try to find significance if everybody's happy with you? Either as a suck up or a manipulator. Or maybe are you more driven, you find by recognition? Or like, man, I want to get to that next level. I care about. And again, it's going to take a little bravery to admit this around a table with some other guys, but I challenge you to think about it. Okay, you got about 8 minutes. How about it? Well, it sounds like some good conversation. I hate to stop you, but we got some tables of 4 and some tables of 11, so it's harder to navigate sharing and have them be equitable. But we need to jump back in. You know, I'm going to just, talk while I drink about 700 ounces of wine. Just kidding. I know, yeah. Normally I'm drinking sodas out of a big gulp, so I guess that's like the wine. It's like the wine equivalent of a big gulp, you know? It's amazing. Well, anybody brave enough to share, like at your table, and don't out the guy next to you, okay, Benjamin? Don't be like, Brad, his deal is this, man, and he's terrible. But anybody brave enough to be like, hey, I feel like this maybe is one I see in myself. And then if you're even brave enough, like, how do you see it playing out? Anybody? All the way back there. Pass that to Jesse, please. Just do the train. Pass it. Bam, bam, bam. I can't toss it, because they'll murder me if I break it. Todd Buck's the scary man.
Hello?
All right. How do you see it playing out, Jesse, for you?
No, just kidding. We kind of talked about, we felt like, first of all, it seems situational. Like, depending on which group you're in, like a big group, we're all in our best behavior here. There's so many just contexts to where I think we all feel like we compare ourselves differently. So I was using an example. I've been in a lot of, credentialed, professions where everybody has a degree and a title. So to me, always being the least smartest guy in the room, I never felt need to compare myself with titles. So I would always say like, well, I could take him. So I would kind of go back to the physical side of things.
Yeah.
Even though I'm not a fighter, I'm too pretty for that.
Yeah, you could. You're
Yeah.
a dangerous man,
Yeah,
Jesse Hamilton.
I'm too good looking to be a serious fighter, but my humility is always my greatest strength.
Yeah, it is.
But we kind of also say, like you fall back to that, there's so many ways it can be spun, but I think we all have that insecurity inferiority complex, and I think we maybe almost subconsciously switch which one we're vulnerable to based on the group we're in. So, like if you're in jiu-jitsu school and everybody's better than you, then you're probably going to think about, well, I've got a hotter wife, or like my house is bigger. I think we'll kind of switch to whatever serves our ego at the moment. And then if you're 110 pounds soaking wet and you're really, really smart and you can play the piano, then you're like, oh, well, I'm multi-talented, and these heathens, all they can do is move couches, So that's kind of what we came up with.
Yeah. So situational. I mean, imagine you're at your 30th high school reunion. Like you're probably feeling the urge to be significant a little bit, right? But if you're down at City Gospel making dinner on a Sunday night, you're the most humble man on earth, right? You're trying to downplay what you do, like, I'm just, I'm a youth pastor. So it is situational. One more. Was anybody else brave enough to share maybe what you feel or see in your life? And then Jesse can pass that around without chucking it. All right, Brad Miller. Pass it to Brad Miller, please. Bring it over here. That microphone only costs like $300, so just keep that in mind.
All right, so I'm going to throw a twist at you, Ryan. But this is more for, I guess I'll stand. I need to stand next to Ron anyways. And so I... Anyways, it's approval. I'm convinced that, I love my son to death and everything. I think I see through this that I've given him approval issues. I know it. I could almost go through it. I could identify how I did it. Not purposefully, but I know it's there. And so this has been really important to me. Reading through it, and I've missed many of the sessions, is to recognize what he's doing. Like I called him the other day or yesterday, and I said, hey, I saw you Friday. It was great and everything. But when he answered the phone, he was like, Father, or whatever, I could tell he was thinking work, because he works for me, which is its own nuance. And so I said, hey, I wanted to let you know, Lafferty's floor was awesome. It was ideal. It was perfect. He's like, oh, I love hearing that. And I was like, boom. And then several people in the audience are seeking approval, and that's never been my jam. But that's probably why I made my kid that way. So it was good for me to reflect a little bigger than myself.
Yeah, that's brave of you to recognize and share. I was talking to a guy named Jim Sandel today who goes to our church. Jim's the man. And his son just made state in cross country, which is a huge accomplishment. Lots of hurdles he overcame, broken feet, sickness, all these things. But Jim was saying when he talks to his kids, he says, hey, I'm happy when you win, but he only uses the proud word for character. And I was like, oh, that's so genius. Because it's so tempting with our boys especially to be like, I'm so proud of you because you threw a no-hitter in, T-ball, I'm like, they're not even throwing balls in T-ball, Matt, right, that we throw the proud word around a lot with accomplishments, especially athletic, and I was like, man, that's genius to say I'm happy when you win, I'm happy for you, but I'm proud of you because you struck out twice and you got back up there and you made contact, right? Cool. All right. Well, good stuff. Well, could there be a better way? So whether you're like, I don't feel the drive for significance at all, Ryan, or you really do feel it, could there be a better place for us to find our significance? Because here what we're talking about is basically we're finding our significance from other people. We're looking at people like a mirror and saying, tell me who I am. Please like me. Please love me. And could there be a better way? Well, God presents a better way. That Ephesians 2:10, so Paul's writing here, and he says, for we are God's masterpiece. What a beautiful word. Like the word literally is like an artistic vibe to it out of Hebrews. So it's like I'm sorry, that's probably Greek, but it has the feeling of like creating like David, okay? Like you're creating a piece of work. So he's saying we're God's masterpiece. That you can find some significance in that, right? Like we're made in the image of God. But then it gets better. He says he has created us anew in Christ Jesus so we can do the good things that he planned for us long ago. That like God created us to do stuff, like good stuff that the God of the universe like made for you, Dave Hitchcock, for me, Ryan Ventura, to do. Like literally, like knit us together in our mother's womb, made us uniquely exactly how we are because he's got a mission he wants us to accomplish. And it feels good to be like sent somewhere to do something, doesn't it? Like if you ever had that in your career with like, hey, we see potential in you and we're going to like do this because we need you to do this. Patrick Grosser, right? Like in my Young Life days, we got sent to South Carolina to start a Young Life area. And that felt pretty good, right? We're like, hey, people think we could help start a Young Life area. That's pretty, they see, well, here's what God's saying. He's like, hey, if you want the ultimate feel of significance in your life, realize that like you're a masterpiece to me. I made you exactly how I wanted you. And then I've got crap for you to do in the kingdom, like good stuff for you to do that's awesome and meaningful and significant. Not that what we do in our 9-to-5 lives isn't, but it's pretty fun to be a part of like eternal stuff. That's what I love about what I get to do. That's why I look forward to Sunday nights with you guys, not just for the late pizza and gigantic bottles of wine, but because I think it's important business, right? Significance. All right, we're going to move on to comfort, all right? And again, maybe you're the contrarian. Some of you guys are like, what's so wrong about comfort, Ryan? Like, what's wrong about comfort, Matt, after a long day of work? Isn't comfort good? Yeah, right? Like, you get home, you, like, put on, like, different clothes. Like, I can't wait to get home and get out of these clothes. I've been wearing these since, like, 7 a.m. this morning. I just want to throw on my sweatpants and a T-shirt and start watching some Netflix, maybe drink a little of the wine. I might steal that, my laptop bag, Doug. Yeah, try to get that through TSA. That'll be funny. Anyway, well, what's wrong with comfort? Well, maybe nothing, right, initially, unless it starts to become the driving force of your life. And comfort, at its worst, is really behind it is this question of, can I face it? So in my life, when life's hard, when I've been hurt by something, when I'm just bored, right? Like life isn't as exciting as I thought it would be. My wife isn't like as exciting as I thought it would be 20 years into marriage. This isn't as exciting. Like whatever it is, like comfort, when it gets to its worst, is really a way for us to avoid facing major things in our life that perhaps we should and could face and grow through them. And the if then lies. So we're back to our book here on number 1 on page 102. Why don't I have somebody else read it for me? Brad Mummert, do you mind reading this for me? You're close. I'll give you this thingamadig that amplifies your voice.
Where at?
Number 1 on page 102. It's up on the screen, too, if you want to see it up here.
The deep idol of comfort tells us the lie that if I can just maintain physical ease or relaxation, if I can just be laid back, if I can just keep from stress or responsibility and experience some pleasure and enjoyment, then life will be more fulfilling, easy, fun, or thrilling.
All right, thank you. Very good. Gold star to you. So the if-then, like you starting to kind of see that correlation that all of these chapters, that I think we make these bargains in our mind, that if this happens in my life, then this will pay off, right? And comfort is the like, if stuff could just work out how I wanted to all of the time, every second of the day, then I'd be happy and I'd be comfortable. And well, yeah, of course, but that's not how it works, right? That comfort can become a driving idol in our lives. And in the same way that significance plays out into a couple of traps, the ones we looked at for approval, for significance, comfort can do the same. And I think we're still on page 102. We're not going to dive into the first two because I don't see them a whole lot in the people I hang out with at Horizon. But you could certainly see like the fear of responsibility trap. Like, have you ever met the 40-year-old guy that's still living with his parents, playing video games in the basement, and you're like, hey, dude, like, maybe you might want to put yourself out there. I don't know. Like, I'm glad that you're really good at Halo, but not sure you're going to find that fulfilling in your 70s, I don't see a ton of people like that at Horizon, so we're not talking about that one. But that could be a trap you could find yourself in. Another trap that I do see a lot of at Horizon, even in my own life, that we won't go deeply into, though, is the dependence on consumption trap. So when comfort becomes an idol in your life that's driving you, then you just begin to, like, pile on the things that make you feel comfortable, right? Whatever that is for you. Like, we're all into different stuff. So maybe it's car-related, maybe it's travel-related, maybe, like, it's gigantic TV-related, do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know what it is, like, whatever TV I have, it's just not big enough, do you know what I mean? Like, it could just be 10 inches bigger, and my wife doesn't like that. She doesn't want a 100-inch TV in our bedroom for some reason. I don't get it, So consumption could be one of them. But here's the one we're going to dive into with our time that remains us, is the turning to escapes trap. So imagine life's hard, okay? Like something's going wrong in your life. You don't like it. You're not sure how to fix it. You might not be able to fix it, right? Sometimes we get stuff in our lives that we can't fix. What are the escapes that we turn to as men typically? What are some of them? Just bounce them out here. What's an escape? Alcohol, right? I already mentioned it, right? I'm like, hey, it's been a stressful day. Man, I would like to go home and have a glass of wine, right? Yeah, on 2 on the nose, Brad. Okay, for me. All right, anybody else? What else do we turn to? Spending. So, Brad, that's a good one. Sports. So, playing sports and watching, right? Just going to numb myself by watching this or go play some golf. And again, not bad things. What else? Isolation. Yeah, if people would just leave me alone, I'd be so much happier, you know? Procrastination, okay. I'll get to that later, right? That's what I'm thinking when I'm procrastinating. Somebody else. What else do we turn to? Food, right? Like, that's like pizza. We're modeling for you tonight how to escape from your pain in the world, okay? Comparison, or at least my life's not as bad as that guy's, right? I mean, he's pathetic. Holy cow, comparison. Yeah, Jeff. I'm not going to write all that because that's a lot of words, but yeah, so ladies, how about that? We'll just put ladies. Alcohol times 2, okay. Is that telling me you're on your second beer? Jesse, is that what you're telling me? What else? What else do we turn to? Let's be real. You want to escape. Life painful, or it's just stressful, right? Like, have you had that? Like, it's been a long weekend. We had an event today after church for volunteers that was 90 minutes. My daughter had a show at Anderson. I ran up there, watched that, and then I ran back here. Like, it's just been a stressful weekend. Imagine that going on in your life with work. What's another escape? Jeff? Yeah. We talked about that last week, right? Like workaholism can be a form of controlling. I can't control this at home, so I'm going to control this in the office. Yes? What was that? Okay. Zero in. Let's go a little more specific. Logan. Tobacco, drugs, right? Wacky tobacco. Okay, let's get real, okay? Because these are all real, and I don't want to illegitimize any of these. We're outing people. Let's put the one up here that we all probably know in the back of our head, but we don't want to say. And I know at this point, like, you're like thinking like, man, I got to go. Whew. Man, this has been fun, Ryan. Thanks for the pizza and the beer, but I got to go to the bathroom. Well, if you get up now, we're all going to be thinking that, you know, you're feeling extra guilty. Okay, so don't do that. Number 4, when a man turns to illegitimate outlets to escape the harshness or pain of his life and find relief. So this is this idea of comfort. Oh, there it is. There's the big word. Here's some things. Again, don't run out of the room because we'd all judge you anyway. No, just kidding. Wouldn't do that. A million years, Brad. But I want to just talk to you about it, all right? Just some real talk. Okay, what are the most visited websites right now? Let's see if you can guess. What's number 1? Oh, that ain't going to work. Oh, there they all are. Look at that. Okay, so Google is number 1. YouTube is number 2. Facebook is number 3. And Pornhub is number 4. So think of all of the websites that exist in the entire world universe. Pornhub is number 4. Okay, so just again, I'm just giving you some facts here tonight. In 2023, in 1 month, there were 2.14 billion with a B visits to Pornhub, which is more than Instagram, Netflix, Pinterest, and TikTok combined that month. That's a lot. Here's porn by the second. So every single second, 28,258 people are connecting to watch porn. That's like not ongoing, but like in that second, there's a new 28,000 people connecting. Every second, $3,075 is being spent on pornography on the internet. Every second, 372 people are typing the word adult into a search engine. Every year, the porn industry has 14 billion, again with a B, in profits. So that's like after they've paid all their bills, after they've paid it all. That's what they're taking home. The stats on it are that 70% of men, and this is the United States, and 40% of women would, and if asked anonymously, of course, would admit, hey, sometime in the last year I've watched porn. And here's the other statistic, is it's the very same whether you're talking to Christian men or non-Christian men. So just throwing that out there. So here's kind of the question. If it's so prominent, then like what's really the big deal, right? Like that's kind of an argument that you could make. Where you're like, if it's clearly like everybody's doing it, right, or a good majority of people are struggling with this, so like, is it really like hurting anybody? You know what I mean? Like if it helps me relax, is it really hurting anybody? Well, again, just more food for thought. There's no judgment here, just giving you information. Here's the stats, okay? So it's definitely hurting people. Men and women in the pornography industry would be one. So adult actors are 3 times more likely to be diagnosed with depression. That's a pretty crazy one, but the stats get crazier, believe it or not. The average lifespan, this is the one that blows my mind, of a porn star is 36.2 years. So obviously suicide's huge, drug overdoses is huge. The lifestyle doesn't lend itself to living very long. And then porn stars have a suicide rate 6 times higher than the general population. So it's definitely hurting people. It's not like a victimless thing that, 70% of the men in the United States are like engaging in pretty regularly. But it's also hurting us. That porn is as addictive as any other chemical that you can get addicted to. That it is like a dopamine dump for our brains. And what happens is every time it's got to be a little bit more, right, to like get us to the excitement level we want it to get us to. So it's literally brain chemistry-wise as addicting as anything else that you could go on some corner and buy. Ongoing use of it is associated with smaller volume and less activity in the striatum. Am I pronouncing that correctly, Dr. J? Yeah. That literally, like, it shrinks parts of our brains. And I know a lot of you, and none of us can stand to have our brain shrink any. Okay, I'm just going to be honest. Like, we need our possibly be that it literally brain plasticity, okay, like our brains physically change as a result of it. And then here's the kicker if we're married, that it doubles your chance of a divorce within the next 2 years if it starts to happen in your life in an ongoing fashion. So it's definitely hurting us, okay? And it's a way that we can comfort ourselves. I'm going to ask a buddy, Steve Moss, to come up here. Steve's a guy that goes to Horizon, just like us. Okay, he's a greeter. I think you're a greeter, right, Steve? He's buddies with John Kirby, and we won't hold that against him, but good friends with John. And Steve's a guy that has dealt with pornography in his life and has found some success and some victory in it. So I asked Steve just to share for like 60 to 90 seconds because I want to hear from him, but also I want you to have a face of somebody who's willing to talk to you. So maybe you're like, hey, I'd like to really talk to a guy instead of just like looking for help online or whatever. Well, Steve's roaming the halls of Horizon. Some Sunday, just pull him to the side and be like, hey, can we talk about that thing? That thing that you're at Authentic Manhood and you talked about? Can we talk about that sometime and get some Starbucks? Right? All right. So, Steve, go.
Well, hey, guys. I heard a lot of chuckling when I saw porn up there. It actually is something serious. It will destroy your marriage. It will destroy you. It's as addictive as a drug. It's been proven that it changes your brain. It's scary stuff once you get into it because you first start off with this, lingerie models, and then you progress. Next thing you know, it's taken over your life. I'm in a group called Men's Healthy Sexuality. They meet all throughout the city. It's kind of based with Crossroads. And we meet weekly to hold each other accountable and to help people heal. And it's amazing the difference it'll make when you eliminate porn from your life. It affected my relationship with my wife and I. I had turned to that because we had multiple kids, then we had, early menopause and all that stuff, and I thought I wasn't hurting anybody. Turned out I was hurting her a lot. And I didn't realize the damage I was doing to our relationship. And by taking these steps to stop it, it has turned our marriage around. It's turned our relationship back to where it was. And it really opened my eyes to the damage that this is doing to our society. Those numbers that he cited, they're probably even higher. The amount of money being made off of porn is staggering. And the amount of damage being done to men is unreal. And I'm a resource. If you want to talk to me, pull me aside. Some people are embarrassed when they first talk about it. If you would have told me I'd be standing in front of a group of men saying, I had a problem with porn, I'd say you're nuts. But now that I put it behind me, I'm more than happy to help anybody put it behind them.
That's awesome. Yeah, thanks, Steve. Thank you. Perfect. Awesome. So I wanted you to hear from a real guy, right? Like, stats are one thing, we're all moved, but story is so much more effective in our lives. So thanks, Steve, for being brave enough to do that and to share with us. Well, let's unpack it, okay? Because it's not just kind of like God's like, porn bad, don't do it, you know, like caveman rules. It's like it actually has a lot deeper thing going on in our hearts. So number 2 on page 64, go back a few chapters. So this is one of the chapters. We were supposed to spend a whole chapter on this, and I was like, I can't do it. I'm going to dovetail it into another one because nobody will come back if we do that week 3, right? So we're doing it the last week. Okay, so go back to page 64. But struggles with pornography and sex betray a deeper need in us, a deep need for intimacy with God and others. That really, like, the finding comfort in pornography, it creates in us a disconnected heart, right? That we're longing for intimacy in some way, and it's not being met, so then we're meeting it kind of artificially. John gave me this quote that I thought was brilliant. It says, addictions are really just places in our lives where we're avoiding intimacy. So, like, really any addiction, when you think about that, like if work is an addiction, you're just trying to maybe avoid intimacy at home with your wife, right? Like conversations, or it's easier to work than to work through conversations with your wife. If you're avoiding, well, we'll get to that in a second. I thought that was good, though. Good quote. Because here's the truth. We're all being honest. So think of that quote we just read, that, like, addictions are a way to avoid intimacy. Like, how many of you guys are married in the room? Raise your hand. So not all of us, but I'd say the majority of us for sure. 60, I don't know, that looked to me like 80%. Okay, I'm not a math guy. My youth pastor math tells me that's 80%. Okay, well, here's the truth. If we're married, that having a healthy sex life with our wife takes work, right? That it takes building. Building's easy when you first get married, but then sustaining intimacy in our relationship, right? In our emotional health together. If you're a follower of Christ and your spiritual intimacy with your wife, like, it takes all of that work outside of the actual 3 minutes of physical intimacy that we're pretty down with, right? We're like, I'm down for those 3 minutes, honey, but I really don't want to sit here and talk about your day. Let's just be honest and shoot it straight. So it's like there's that part of you that's like, it's just easier. It's easier than fighting for an emotionally, spiritually, relationally, and sexually healthy relationship with your wife sometimes. But the problem is it's false. So back in the 50s, a guy who won a Nobel Prize a little bit later in the 70s named Dr. Nicholas Timbergen, he discovered, okay, so these butterflies, I don't know what type they are, but that's the picture of them. He did an experiment. So he was really into, like, figuring out colorings and markings and what, attracted animals to other animals. And he put a bunch of male and female butterflies into an enclosure. But then he made a bunch of cardboard butterflies that were like the female butterflies, but with exaggerated features. So all of the spots were a little bit bigger. All of the hues were a little bit deeper. And what do you think happened? The male butterflies in the enclosure just started humping the crap out of every cardboard butterfly they could find, okay? That'll live on the internet forever, okay? Go to the website. Maybe I'll have a job, who knows? that they totally neglected the real butterflies and they were drawn to the artificial ones. Like, this is real science. The guy, like, proved it. And as I think of my relationship with my wife and our sexual relationship over the years and the times that this has been an issue in my life, I was settling for cardboard butterflies, right? I'm like, they look better? Well, yeah, of course, right? Like, you're talking about, like, they're picking, like, the top women in the world and having them do horrible things that probably your wife won't do with you, right? Like, if you're being honest. Of course it's going to look more alluring than loving the same woman for your whole life. But man, is the payoff worth it, right? Like, it's just worth it. It's worth it to have the real thing. That porn is a way that we disconnect from our hearts and build kind of false intimacy in our lives. And here's the thing I want to leave you with. So there's some resources. So Steve mentioned a resource that I'm sure he'd remind us of. There's a good one called Covenant Eyes that I've used and Steve uses. So it's a way, basically, it's a software where it's kind of like you self-impose a lockdown on your phone, okay, where you give the code to maybe your wife or your best friend, and you're like, hey, and it will lock your phone down where you won't be able to look at porn anymore. And you won't know that, like, 6-digit code because your wife ain't going to give it to you. I'd like to hear that argument, Brad. So, hey, honey, you know that code that okay, so that's a resource. And there's a bazillion of them online. There's a lot of Pure Hope's another one that's pretty strong. But I would say the more you can bring it out into the light, the better. Okay, the more you can bring it out of the darkness, it'll help you. But here's the deal, is that we need intimacy in our lives. And I know you kind of like giggle, but intimacy is like, it's not always sexual. Close familiarity or friendships, just closeness. And here's what I want for all of us. This is my big goal. So we're ending Authentic Manhood for the season here in 6 minutes. So I've been driving at this for 6 weeks now with you guys because we took a week off. This is what I think God wants for each of us. And this is what I want for you. This is what I want for my sons. This is what I want for myself. Is I want to live a life where I am fully known and I know fully. Right? And it starts with God. That I have this intimacy with God where, like, he knows me fully. He knows what a tool I am and the dumb things I've done. And I'm trying to know him more fully. But I want to have a relationship with my wife, if that's you, if you're married, and it applies, where, like, you're fully known. There's not all these things hiding in the closet. And you fully know her, right? It's Adam and Eve before the fall, right? They're just walking around naked, just picking fruit and doing it, right? Like, it was amazing. And then the fall happens and it just starts changing. And then I want you to find and have intimacy with other guys in your life. So pursue intimacy with God. G.K. Chesterton, who is a pastor a long time ago, has a good quote. He says, every man who knocks on the door of a brothel is looking for God. That really this desire within us for intimacy at its base level is a desire to connect with the God of the universe. Hopefully you'll keep taking those steps. I encourage you to pursue intimacy with your wife. Like, it can be done. Things can be repaired. You know, you can reignite. Like Becky and I, it's kind of gross as my teenagers when I talk about it, but like we've been married 22 years, and the last like 2 years have been awesome. Like, it's been like going back to like year 1, 2, and 3. Do you know what I mean? They're like, hey, why is your door locked? We're just changing. You know, we're doing laundry in here. You know, like, it can happen, but it takes investing in the other places outside of those 3 minutes. And then pursuing intimacy with other men, okay? And here's what I love what I get to do here at Authentic Manhood. And after coming out of Authentic Manhood last session, what I realized is I didn't have a whole lot of men in my life that I had, again, don't giggle, but intimate relationships with, up close and personal, or hopefully, I don't think we're there yet, but we'll get to the point where we're fully known and we know each other fully. So I'd encourage you, as Authentic Manhood, it ends. Tonight's the last one. We'll jump back in March. But there are so many ways to stay connected with men here at Horizon that I want you to think about. So there's 2 I'm going to propose to you. One is a morning one. So I'm going to let my buddy Scott Springer do like a 30, 45-second sell. He's a big part of that. And then I'll have Pat Grosser do the next one.
Yeah. Hi, my name's Scott. We've been here for nearly 4 years with my family. I have 4 kids, my wife and I. And we started here as kind of the pandemic time, right before the pandemic, and I don't know if the rest of you struggle with the same thing, but it was a lot of isolation, right? We were with our family, but there was a lot of disconnection, whether it's at work or whether it was at, just social events. You just didn't have them, right? So we were all, I realized really quick that, like, I need other men to encourage and spur me on and to help me walk this walk that we're all trying to do. So I started looking into men's group. We had this in the mornings as well on Monday mornings, and like that was the perfect time for me. So 609 was like the time for me where I didn't impact my family, right, and I could get away. So I found that Harold, Torin, and a bunch of other guys, these guys right here, all three of them are in our men's group, were meeting, and so I jumped into that group, and what I was after was a group of men that, like, were going to support me, were going to love on me when I was down, and encourage and keep pushing me forward. So that's what it is. We know each other. We look at each other when we walk in the door at Horizon, and it's just when I see one of those guys, I light up. I saw Steve this morning. He had a horrible accident just recently, and he's been down and out, and that was like my highlight of my day was to see Steve greeting at the front door this morning. So just those bonds that we're able to build. We've done some group stuff together where we've gone outside of our group and helped out in the community and different stuff. But just want to invite you, if men who are really courageous can get up at 6:09 in the morning and be there. That's if you can get over that obstacle, then great. We're in a book right now. I think we stopped for a little bit, and then we're coming back to it. It's about 2 Samuel 23 and the mighty men of David. Really great stuff to kind of like dig in and support one another, and as David had these men around him that just kind of had his back and like just pushed him through all the crazy stuff. We talk about one of them went down into a pit on this snowy day. It's kind of this really odd, scripture where he just goes and kills a lion down in this pit, and just talking about the bravery and what that took, and having these guys with us is the only way we're going to go into that pit. So 6:09 Monday mornings. We start up November 11th, back up November 11th.
Yeah, and there's other morning groups throughout the week, but Scott's in the Monday one. Patrick, do you want to tell us about your Tuesday night group?
We do not meet at 6:09 a.m. So there's some of us that are night owls, myself included. So 7 p.m. on Tuesday nights, Skybox B. We've got about 15 guys. Any given week, probably 10 guys show up. People travel or whatever for work. So it's not like it doesn't have to be a weekly thing. We don't take attendance or whatever. But we do the pathway, so it's very simple where the equipping service on Sunday, there's a pathway guide that some of the pastors work on to kind of give discussion questions so you can dig deeper and kind of understand better what the pastor was talking about in the equipping service. So it helps us to dig deeper, understand it better. We read through the passage, we study it, we learn kind of how to study the Bible a little bit. But it makes it simple for me because I don't have to read a whole other thing. It's just right in line with what we talked about on Sunday. It reminds me of what we talked about on Sunday. And we focus a lot on, we got a lot of feedback from the group this past year, and everybody's asking for application. So how do we apply what we're learning to our lives, right? Because nobody wants to learn a bunch of cool stuff about the Bible and never do anything with it. Same thing with this seminar. This is awesome information, but if we don't do anything with it, it doesn't really mean anything. So we haven't really learned anything if we don't change our behavior. So that's what we really focus on. But the bonus there, obviously, that I've learned, it wasn't obvious to me at first, was the friendships. So I've been doing it for a few years. There's some guys that have been there for even longer than that. Some guys have just recently joined within the last week or so. And we kind of have people come in and out, and they move to other groups. We don't really worry about, how is our group? We're worried about and conscious about how are those guys doing? How are they doing? So I wouldn't stress, if you're thinking about a group, I wouldn't stress about which is the perfect fit for you, but just pick something. If you want some sort of connection with guys or a deeper Bible study, try it out. If you don't vibe with those guys or that time's not convenient, try another one. You'll eventually find where you need to be. There's lots of different times, different days, different times a day. We do have Drew to help guide us and kind of correct us a little bit, because sometimes we get off on these tangents, and it's nice to have the pastor there to kind of guide us and interpret a little bit better. But we also have some of the guys lead also. So it's not like a lecture format. It's very much a discussion, very open. And we try to do a service project once a quarter, and then a social thing once a quarter also. So I was initially invited by Drew just during the COVID years of, hey, we're doing this thing on Zoom now. Do you want to check it out? I didn't realize how much I really wanted that. I just checked it out, and then I realized, well, this is really awesome, because I'm really isolated, being self-employed and then being in COVID. I'm not the type to like reach out and try to organize something. So yeah, it's been a really big part of my life and helping me with my faith to take that next step. So social and also spiritual benefits here to do in a group. But if you have questions or you're interested, you can talk to me or also Drew directly if you want more information.
Nice. Thanks, Pat. Yeah, well, beautiful. So there's definitely a small group for you here, a men's group. I mean, if you're interested, talk to me, talk to John Kirby, Drew, the two guys you just heard from, others in this room. Lots of guys are in them. So just ask. I mean, I have one on Sunday nights. A lot of the guys in my group are here tonight. And so talk to me if you're interested in that. That might work for you. Another thing is next Saturday is God's Home Info. So Chad is leading a thing on a Saturday morning. So it's for married couples, and he'll go through some cool stuff that he's just learned over the years. He's read in books. The guy reads. I mean, it's crazy, right? And he'll help you in your marriage to think through some things. So that's coming up. The next Authentic Manhood, I think, will be in March, February 23rd. Yeah. So it's late, a little bit later. I think we started in January last time. I'd love for you to fill out the surveys on your table if you didn't fill one out last week. If you already did it last week, no need to do it again. But just fill it out. And then lastly, just let me leave you just again with that verse, that the God of the universe knows you fully, okay? The Bible says that he knit you together in your mother's womb. He knew you before you were born. And he's knowable. Like, isn't that amazing? That, like, he's not far off and distant, that he came near and he's saying, hey, just know me, walk with me. I can help you. That I encourage you till we meet again at a Authentic Manhood in the future. So just pursue that. Just have a conversation, You want a Bible? We got tons of Bibles around here. Jump into the Gospel of John. That's a good spot to start reading if you're like, sometimes if you pick up the Bible, you're like, I'm going to start in Genesis. You get a few chapters in and it gets pretty thick, and you need somebody to kind of help decipher. So just jump into John and just learn about Jesus. Like, if you learn about Jesus, you'll fall in love. Cool. I'm going to pray for us. We're done. I stole 5 extra minutes of your life, so I apologize for that. But thank you for the gigantic bottles of wine, Doug. Tim? Yeah. Hey, it's my pleasure. Thanks for putting up with me. Thanks for putting up with me. You guys are awesome. I look forward to this every week, and talk to me around Horizon. I'm always open to hang out, get coffee, lunch. Yeah, let me pray. God, thanks for these men. Thank you that you love us. Thank you that we are more than the traps that maybe we fall into in our lives, that we are more than anything, that you made us, and you say that we're masterpieces, that we're your workmanship, and you created us to do good things. So each one of these men, that you have ideas and a journey ahead for them. And I just pray that we would feel that we would seek you and find you as you tell us in your word that you are findable, you are knowable. Give these guys great weeks in your name. Amen. All right, boys, have a great night. It's been fun. See you around Horizon.